I am so thrilled because today I have two of my coworkers here. And so I'm so excited to talk to them today and for you to meet them. I know you've met them both previously. Brooke has been our star this week on Facebook sharing about the myths of the court. And Naomi, I know y'all have met previously as well through interviews and through, she used to manage our social media account way back in the day. So I will let them go ahead and introduce themselves and tell what their role with the at Call to Peace Ministries is.
My name is Brooke, and I work as an advocate. I've been a volunteer with Call to Peace Ministries since the first advocacy training. I completed that first year and have been volunteering that way. And then in about a year ago, came on staff as an advocate and then an advocate coordinator, meaning that I oversee the volunteers in the Western region.
I'm Naomi, and in January, I will have been here for 4 years, which is really exciting. I just realized that. And I'm an advocate as well. I'm also the intake coordinator. So all the people that send in advocacy requests, most of the time they're going to talk to me.
Yes, and Naomi is the person I referred to multiple times in the interview. For those who donated your Domestic Violence Awareness Month, that $50 covers a 2-hour free consultation. Every woman gets 2 hours of a free consultation when they call in Call to Peace Ministries for the first time. Anyway, we are looking forward to getting in today's interview. If everybody can tell Brooke and Naomi hello, let us know where you're chatting from. Our advocates that are watching, please cheer us on. Let us know if you have any questions. Today, we're going to be talking about, am I ready to be an advocate? And so I am excited about this topic because right now we are in need of advocates. We have reached record numbers of women requesting help. And we are so glad that people are finding out about us and we're able to assist them and we're able to help them be able to walk through the process of overcoming domestic abuse and starting over. And it's so complex, but we need more advocates to do this. So I believe we need how many more advocates, Naomi?
Oh, gosh. Well, current projections are to meet our current need, we would need either 2 full-time staff members, which is not a reality that's going to happen, or 10 volunteer advocates. I currently have about 40 women on the wait list just waiting for an advocate, and there's another 30-ish in somewhere in the process scheduling or just a request, and they haven't made an appointment yet.
Yes. So, did you want to say something, Brooke?
Nope. Just, yep, we have a need.
Need advocate.
So we are here today to kind of talk about this because I know for a lot of people it can seem intimidating. I affiliated as an advocate with Call to Peace this year. I remember feeling like very intimidated myself just thinking about that. Even though you maybe been through it or know a lot about domestic abuse, it just feels overwhelming to feel responsible for somebody walking with them through this. But it's really not, because we have people like Brooke and Portia and Naomi that are there helping you along this process. And so today we're just going to kind of delve a little bit deeper into this, like what all is involved in becoming an advocate. Are you ready? Let's kind of tackle some of these questions that may be holding you back from taking that step forward of becoming a faith-based advocate. And for those who are interested and not started the process, we have a year-long training program that starts in January. You can start anytime, but it's starting afresh in January. So it's perfect time for the new year to join in. And so we're going to be talking about that after you've gone through this course of, am I ready to be an advocate? So let's jump on in. Are y'all ready?
Yeah.
All right. So we just mentioned the course. What about if I can't attend these live classes? They're every day, or every Tuesday. Excuse me, every day would be a lot. Every Tuesday at 11
courses.
And they're 2 hours, and not everybody can do that during the workday. So what if I can't attend?
That's a great question. I have several advocates who are in training right now who work a 9-to-5 job, so they can't be live in class. So what they do is they watch the replay when it's convenient for them. And then we ask them to send in just a couple sentences, so 2 to 3 sentences of what they kind of learned from each class that they weren't able to attend live in person. And so you don't have to be able to be available during that time period in order to participate. And then we have them. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to mention, we also have a Q&A on Saturdays once a month. So even if you're not there on Tuesdays, you can still probably pop in on the Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, that's good to know. And I always enjoy just making, even if I can, making some of the class live because I enjoy all the updates that we get at the beginning of class. Like we talk about things going on in the advocacy world that if you weren't in this class, you would not know. So you're updated on all the hot topics going on, laws being passed. Oh, this is happening. We need to be careful about how we're talking about this. And it's just, I feel like it's a news brief. It's for the
Mm.
advocacy world. It's really awesome to
Yeah.
be on top of that and learn all of that as well.
Yeah.
Um, and then the next question is if sometimes you're people like me, you get behind. Maybe you're a procrastinator. Maybe your work season just gets really busy and you can't
Mhm.
miss. It's like 5 classes and you're like, great. To start over, what happens if I get behind?
It's very similar to if you can't attend the live classes, you just work at your pace. You could attend the live classes and catch up on stuff. We really want anybody to be able to make this work for their schedule because the need is so desperate. If you
Mm-hmm.
can't attend, if you get behind, life happens. And then once you've gone through the course, once you can repeat it. So yeah, if you got 7 months behind, you just restart, you know, make it work for your schedule.
Yep. And we just, I like to say, like, when you're, because we do have advocates that happens to, that again, they're working 9 to 5 and their schedule, it's Christmas time and they work in a retail environment. So they're super busy. And I encourage them to just take what's the next easy thing you can do. Let's just do the next easiest thing. Can you watch 10 minutes of a class? You do that over a week and you've almost finished a full class, So, just being mindful. And if you start to fall behind, we're here to help you. So you can reach out to Portia or I just for encouragement and how do I tackle this, and a voice to hear your frustrations and your situation so that we're supporting you and loving on you. So we want this to be successful for you.
Yes. And what if I can't afford it? Because it does cost money to take the advocacy course.
There's a very generous scholarship program. You just email Dr. Deborah at faith.advocacy8@gmail.com and let her know why you need a scholarship. If there's a portion that you can pay, great. If not, we have a lot of women that come in on full scholarships. Because just because you can't afford it doesn't mean that you can't offer your time and services when you're done.
Yes. And I see somebody in here commented they don't read the materials for each class, and I haven't found the laws for my state. I don't believe there's a such thing as a terrible student. I think that no matter how much of this class that you're taking, if you're not reading the materials, you're missing some of the benefits, but you're still learning. Even if you're sitting in there each class, you're learning so much about domestic abuse and how it is so deceivious. It's so hard to see, and it's also how it works in the course system. It will open your mind to a whole new world that you never knew existed, even if you've been through domestic abuse. Like it's just there's so many cases that are so complex and so many different facets that you're like, I didn't even realize it went to the steps. And so, yes, any of this is good. I don't know. Would y'all have a comment to say on that?
Yeah, I think there are things that we teach our advocates how to access their local laws. So that question actually came up in a meeting I was in with Dr. Deborah yesterday, and there's a website called womenslaw.org. I just simply go to that site, put in the state they live in, and I can pull up all of their domestic violence laws, their divorce laws, their custody laws, and I can look at them right there. So we give tools, because there are all these states and their laws are all different, but there's tools and then there's basic principles that apply to everyone, right? And then, like, if you're not reading that news article that goes along or that research article, Dr. Deborah based her class usually around that kind of material, and so it's going to be covered at least at a high level, and she's just giving you specific instances to say, hey, this is what it looks like in reality, right, in real life and stuff. And so there's not an expectation that you actually would do any work outside of class other than there's a once a month quiz. But otherwise, we're asking you just to be there. And then if you can't show up in person, that, 2 to 3 sentences.
That sounds simple.
So.
Okay, so we're going to kind of get into a deeper question here. And what if we don't know about religious things? Like, and we're taking this course and we feel like maybe we're not very well versed in faith as far as how it impacts us. in our everyday life.
It's another thing that you can learn. And I will say that having talked to probably 300 women, give or take, this year, I mean, I just spoke with a woman the other day who was raised Amish, and I was not raised Amish. So a lot of it is asking, well, what was this like for you? How does that impact what is it like for her? I've spoken to so many different religions and denominations, and it's really more about like, well, you tell me what your experience is and listening and then reflecting back to, like if that bothers her, all right. And then we also have church partnership, and it's fantastic. I can't say enough about Dan right now.
Yes,
Yeah.
we are grateful for Dan.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's a piece. I just talked to a client this morning, and navigating how to talk to her elders. I suggested, well, if you want to talk about to your church, maybe we should call Dan in, who is also a pastor, into this conversation just to help him be able to speak that language that pastors already speak, right? But to the particular question of like, what do we do if someone asks me a question that I don't have an answer to? I'm honest. I don't know. Let me go work that out for you. Let me see if I can help you. I'm very prayerful in my approach, and I'm also asking the Lord. But the end story is that I'm not the stop all for this person. I'm not their only resource. And empowering them to be able to, really what we're doing is empowering them to be able to be the woman they need to be in order to get through this. And some of that is giving them the tools to research their own questions. So how do we look for that question? What would I do if I would had that question? And believing that they're capable of coming up with an answer that is biblical and right.
Wow. I love that. It's helping them reconnect with God. And it's not helping them reconnect with God like through our own relationship, although we can be speaking things that God's doing in our life. It's helping them find the source, because we believe that God can speak to them through his word and through the Holy Spirit as well, and lead and guide and direct them. And so long, so many survivors have not been allowed to hear what God is saying to their hearts through his word and following him. So it's a huge healing process of letting them learn to surrender to God and to follow him and how he's leading them. And so
well said. Yeah.
This is a tough one too. What about legal questions? That intimidates me.
I kind of enjoy that part, to be honest with you. I think it's very intimidating to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And as an advocate, if I'm assigning you a client, I'm going to have that conversation with you. Are you comfortable with this type of situation? This client is going to be really heavy, or maybe this client is going to be really heavy with the church. Which one are you more comfortable with? I mean, right now we have a huge selection to choose from. But I mean, really, it's looking up those statutes, womenslaw.org. What does your attorney say? We don't give legal advice, so we always give a disclaimer and say, like, okay, we can help you with preparing for court as far as documentation goes, best practices, just letting them get all the things out and helping organize, and then asking good questions. Okay, well, tell me more about how your parent coordinator works. Tell me more about what CPS said, and are there any specific stipulations? What homework did your attorney give you? Okay, what's the first step we can take with that? So you don't have to know everything. They're going to already have legal professionals for the most part, and we're just assisting them with interaction.
Oh, I love that. And something personal is Naomi is so good about that. And sometimes they get to know you as an advocate too. They know a little bit about your background and maybe where things that you've walked through. And they'll be like, hey, I'm going to let you know I've got this woman. And then maybe it touches parts of your story where you're like, oh, I've walked through that before. And it's really cool how we place that, because it's like, oh, this woman has this background, which may be similar to your background, and you can walk together through that. And it's just very healing too, to be able to go in and be able to help somebody else through something that you've walked through, and be like, you know what, I've been there, I've made it through the other side. And so I really love that about Call to Peace, how you're matching advocates up very prayerfully, very specifically with women that need their help. And so I hope that gives women reaching out to confidence that you're going to be well taken care of, and finding an advocate that can really relate to what you're going through and is got experience in your type of case. Well,
That's
Yeah.
some of what Portia and Brooke do when they're interviewing is they say, like, "What is your background like?" And I'm gonna look for somebody with
mhm,
that background. And I'll have people request, like, "Do you have a woman that's in her 60s that, dealt with betrayal?" I'm like, "Yes." We have all kinds. And so that's part of my job that I really love is making that great connection so that they have somebody to relate to.
mhm,
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as court questions go, we do have an entire month worth of training on court. And if that doesn't give you some amount of sense, then we also have a practicum month where we ask a lot of questions. We answer all of your practical questions. And then Portia and I are always here as a backup. So if something is, you have a moment where you're like, I'm curious about how this works, or I don't understand it, then you can reach out to Portia and I, and and then ultimately we can, Dr. Deborah has a lot of experience, like 40 years, so we can ask her and we can meet with her. So it can be really helpful that way too. And there's some of us in the ministry who are training under her to get sort of absorb all of her knowledge so that we can be able to pass it on.
yes. And then our next question is, what if I'm still getting triggered?
Join the club. Like, I mean, I think if you're a survivor and you go into this work, at some point you're going to be triggered by something. And we did a whole book study this year on, like, not doing that anymore. And I can't remember the name. What was Burned Out to Beloved?
Burned Out to Beloved.
Like, not getting burned out as an advocate. So, we have resources for you to help support you. A lot of women that are going through this, remembering it's a year-long course. If you're getting triggered in the second month, you might not have that same trigger in month 10. Just because you finish doesn't mean you have to advocate. Clearly we're not going to force you to do that. But it's a process. You can repeat it maybe the second year through. That's when you feel ready. And we'll see that a lot with women coming through.
Yeah. And when Portia and I, when you're ready to be onboarded, Portia and I send you out a survey, and it actually asks you a bunch of questions about where are you at in your process. We want you to be super honest, and it gives us an opportunity to have that conversation with you, to say, oh, well, I see that this thing is still difficult for you, or it's medium. What does that mean for you? What does it look like in your daily life? And then supporting you in that, right? So that you feel like, I don't want you to take a client on if this isn't what God's calling you to, right? But if what you need is to feel loved and supported and backed up, then and while you make this kind of step in faith, I want to be that person for you. Portia wants to be that person for you, to help you step out and see God meet you and work through you and in you. It's really amazing and helpful and healing, honestly.
Awesome. Yes, I think it's very healing too. A quote that I often remind myself: one trigger that you walk through and overcome is one less trigger that you have to deal with. Like that's a victory. So sometimes, even though it's very scary, like being able to put yourself in a situation not overly triggered or bad in a bad way, but like where you're facing something that may bring up something that just surfaces that you haven't dealt with before, allows you to go down deeper and heal in ways that maybe you really haven't before. And sometimes I think probably a lot of women who are advocates find a lot of times that it maybe does trigger something briefly, like, or something resurfaces when you're talking to a client. I've had that happen before. And it just allows you to go back down to that wound and be able to speak to it and be like, oh, like, this is the truth. Maybe you didn't have an advocate in that situation, or maybe you walked through it, but you're able to go back and kind of like speak to that person inside and be like, this is what you deserve to. This is the truth. I don't know. It's just very healing and very redeeming.
Yeah, I actually had that this week. We're developing a course for a new advanced course. And so the topic we were talking about triggered a memory for me, triggered a moment in time. And I very much had to spend, time. I had to call Naomi, like this happened, and work through this moment in my time. But because I have the tools, because I've had time, it ended up being super healing, because I realized, like, oh, that shame and guilt I've been carrying for 20 years about that incident, it's not mine, it's his. He did this to me. And it was so helpful. And honestly, I have, I lead support groups too. And I have some ladies in my support group right now, which they were asking me about, when should I do advocacy classes? And I was saying, well, it can be really healing, and I've had several of my clients go through them and have really appreciated them. And it's been a blessing for them, and a healing blessing.
Yes. I feel like I'm saying this all the time, but I feel like every survivor should go through the advocacy course.
It's so
really
helpful.
You should. It is so helpful and healing to be able to understand course of control, because there's things that may have happened in your life. Like for me, that new course is coming out. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm like, I'm gonna be on that one. I know it's gonna be triggering, but I will be there. But I mean, that type of stuff, like being able to understand it from a deeper perspective, be like, wow, that was abuse. I didn't realize it. And it just allows you to be able to understand it. I know we've had women come back and say they were get ready to get engaged. They were they had come out of domestic abuse, healed, or so they thought. And they're like, I'm just doing advocacy course, and they're engaged, and they have broken off engagements or relationships after getting the advocacy, and realized they were about ready to go back in another very domestically abusive relationship. So women that come out of a domestic abuse are statistically more likely to end up in abuse again. So I highly recommend the advocacy course. We work through it. And no, we are not advocating that in divorce or remarriage. We're just telling stories of what has happened for women. And so I definitely cannot speak highly enough of it for survivors. And our next question is, what if I misguide her?
Say it again.
What if I misguide her? Like, what if I tell her the wrong thing?
Okay.
You guys, I've heard your answer to this, and it's good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is a common question, right? And this is a fear, right? And so this is a thing where I will remind myself. I do this a lot for myself, but also, and it's where I came up with this idea. And then I remind my ones I'm working with, we are not her answer. Jesus is her answer. And so as we're walking with her, we get to point her back to Jesus constantly, but we're also going to just make mistakes. That is part of being human. And even in my mistakes, I'm pointing someone to Jesus. I'm saying, I will have a conversation in the very beginning with a new client, and I will say, like, I'm not perfect, and I'm going to fail you at some point in time. It's not my intention. My intention is to do the best I can for you, but I'm not Jesus. And Jesus is the only one who can be perfect for you, but I want to walk with you in this. And so, and then I remind my advocates who struggle with the same thing, don't forget, you can't be perfect. That was Jesus's job. He's already done it. You get to be his hands and feet right now. You get to rely on Christ. You get to grow in your trust of who he is and what he's calling you to. And that's part of relationship, is learning also, like, what does a mistake look like and feel like in a healthy environment? So, I'm having some conflict with my advocate. I don't understand what she said or what have you. This is an opportunity for them to do conflict in a healthy way. We're not family. We don't have all these old patterns with them. Hopefully we're able to push in. It's much easier for me to ask, if my client is unhappy, what about the conversation we just had has made you uncomfortable? And I want to hear that feedback. I want to make them feel comfortable. And because it's not my mother or my best friend, it's much less charged. And so you get to have these great opportunities. You're being very prayerful. And I have seen this over and over, where the conflict ends up being something that then they go on and say, oh, that's what it's like to have an actual conversation with someone when I disagree. And that's amazing.
Wow. That was such a good answer. I'm like, wow, that was good. That's so true. It's so healing for them as well. Like, wow. And I think so many times survivors of domestic abuse feel they have to be perfect because that was what they were demanded in their homes. So it feels very scary to make a mistake. And like, if you make a mistake, you think that you're going to be rejected, or your mind's tensing up and embracing for abuse. But it's kind of healing when you come to a situation and be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't say that. And you learn how to deal with mistakes and receive grace. Called to be a safe community, where as staff, we do definitely understand survivors and understand the triggers and want to work with people through those things and help each other find wholeness and healing in Christ. So I can say from the advocate's perspective and like knowing them personally, I know that they are very grace driven and very understanding of triggers and how that works. So it's a great community to find healing in. So thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then what if I have a full-time job or limited availability?
We'll still take you. Like, bottom line, all of our survivors, even the vast majority of them, like the demographic is going to be women who have been staying at home, homeschool moms. We have a lot of those, but there's also full-time working moms that are survivors. And if you're a full-time working advocate, y'all can talk in the evenings. You can talk on the weekends. It doesn't make you less of an advocate. It's just something that I try to factor in when I'm making a match. So please still come.
Yes. And then do I have to go to court with her?
Yes.
No scaring people.
Sorry. No, you don't, but you can if you want to and you live close enough. It's not a requirement.
It means a lot to women when you can show up and sit with them in court.
Yeah.
You don't have to say anything, but just sitting nearby with your hand on her shoulder, just letting her know you for her can mean everything in the world to her.
Yeah.
I think occasionally we'll also be in conversations. Like I have sat with a woman virtually on a little phone. It was super fun in her attorney's office because she couldn't understand her attorney. And so she just had me sit and listen, which was really fantastic to see. It was very easy to see what was going on between them. And she was, very, very triggered. And I was like, all right, well, let's have a conversation about this. So it helps, but not everybody does this. And it's really about what the woman wants and what you're capable of. You don't have to say yes. And many times we're not geographically close enough. And that's where we can refer to their local shelters and say, let's see if there's a service near you that can have anybody just go and sit with you in court that's going to have some training. It can be there to be in-person support.
Yeah. So my local shelter has somebody at the court all the time in domestic abuse court. So that court always has an advocate in it from the local shelter. And you can request an advocate to attend other hearings with you. So that's a resource that we can recommend. And because I often I'm in Washington, and so like there's just not always a lot of cases here, and so I'll end up working with somebody in North Carolina because that's where the need is at the moment. Hard to get to court.
And then kind of a side question is that, do I have to talk to any professionals? Can I be subpoenaed in as a witness?
Well, so something interesting in North Carolina is there is a state statute that conversations relating to domestic violence are privileged. And I would think that most states have a similar statute where those conversations are confidential. Our local shelter doesn't release records. We don't release our records. So I don't think that we can be subpoenaed. I mean, like, they can try, but I don't think that it's going to work because there is a state statute giving privilege to those kinds of conversations that occurred within a domestic violence ministry. Do you have to talk to professionals? I have. Not often. The most professional I'm going to talk to is usually somebody's counselor or somebody at the church. Those are my top two, and then rarely there's going to be an attorney involved.
Yeah, and there's also the way you explain it to your clients is to remind I let them know, like, I'm your silent partner. It's not I'm not here to be the person on the front line, and so I'm here to empower and educate, but I don't even want to be in that role of I don't have any certifications that make me qualified to speak to anything inside of a courtroom. That is a very specific job, and there are people who have to go through training and pay for certifications, and I don't have any of that. I am here to be your friend.
I love how that's clearly separated. That could be a huge concern, I'm sure, for a lot of women, and that would
Right?
be very overwhelming. So, um, what? Speaking of overwhelming, what happens if I get somebody and I feel a little overwhelmed? What kind of support can you give me?
So much support. That's all Brooke, though. So good luck.
Well, I like to say to my advocate volunteers that I'm your advocate. So you're advocating for these women, and I'm advocating for you. So the same kind of conversations that you would want your client to call you for, I want you to call me for. So I make myself available. Portia is the same way. We both describe it the exact same way. We're here to support you. We want you to be able to volunteer long term. What we don't want you to burn out. We want you to have good boundaries. We want you to be able to, I had a client this week who had I had an advocate this week who had a intense conversation with one of her clients. She calls me, "Hey, can you talk?" Yep. And we had a conversation about what was difficult about that conversation for her. And we walked through it. And by the time she was done, she felt better, and that is why Portia and I exist, is to help our advocates stay for the long term, feel supported, and have an avenue where they feel very comfortable talking to somebody who understands it. Right? We've had the same training, so we understand the dynamics that you're dealing with, and and then when a case is confusing, like, because you're talking to them, it's like, what in the world is going on here? It's helpful to have a second voice. Just listen, even because you might you figured out talking, but Portia and I can be here to listen.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And then what support is there for working with churches as an advocate? Because that can feel intimidating too, if I know I have to talk to a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I will say that it really varies, but as far as like the conversations with the pastors go, good, bad, in the middle. But we have Dan, and I'm so glad that Dan exists and that he's on staff with us full time, and what I do basically is I call Dan and I say, "Hey, Dan, I've got a lady trying to work with her church, and either they're supporting her, but they need a little bit more education, or they're not supporting her, but she would like them to support her." And he'll go in and she'll introduce him to her pastor, and he'll have a conversation with them and hear from the pastor what their perspective is, and will help the leadership of the church understand the dynamics, understand like, how do you support a woman well? How do you hold him accountable while also caring for him? That's one of the main concerns that I've seen, is they want to make sure that both people are taken care of, and there's a way to do that well, and there's a way to do that poorly,
Mm-hmm.
and then they just have ongoing conversations as the situation progresses. And so then you have Dan helping the pastor. Sometimes I'm talking to the pastor, just kind of all being that supportive role.
Mm-hmm. That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is so good to know. So is there any other questions anybody has in the comments? I haven't seen any. So if you're watching this, you have one, go ahead and drop it in the comments before we head out. And is there anything else y'all wanted to add?
I guess I just want to say that a couple things. One, like I said before, nobody wants you to advocate unless this is what the Lord is calling you to. So if you get 6 months into this process and the Lord clearly calls you in a different direction, no one is going to be upset. No one's going to, "Oh, well, it's not a waste of our time." These classes are educational, and they're usually very helpful for your healing. And, if you're feeling like you're called to start, it doesn't mean you're going the entire year. It means you're doing that one day, right? And then just to remember, like, it is scary. I mean, I was just, as preparing for this interview, I thought about back to my very first case that Naomi assigned me, and I was scared. I don't know what I'm going to do, and that person and I still talk on almost a weekly basis, and she loves me, and we've found our rhythm, and the Lord really did call us into each other's lives, not just me for her, but her for me. And it's been a huge blessing, and it's very healing. It can be hard. Community is super important to have that around you. And, but we want you to walk in what the Lord wants. And so that's another part that Portia and Naomi and I can help you kind of figure out is this what the Lord's calling you to? I'm willing to meet with you before you even start classes to chat through like where are you at in your process, what are your personal questions that we haven't covered in this interview. You can reach out to me at brooke@calledtopeace.org, and I will set up a time for us to just chat and have a conversation about where are you at, and you can ask any questions that we didn't answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So if you're watching this, I'm going to remind you what we said in the beginning. Advocacy course starts up in the beginning of January. I have linked at the top of this post. It cannot get the browser to work at this moment, so I'm very sorry. But go to calledtopeace.org. It's there. Click on that. Go to join us. And you can click on become a faith-based advocate or request an advocate. That's if you're requesting one. But click become a faith-based advocate to learn more about becoming an advocate with Called to Peace and register for the course that begins in January. We would love to have you there. And like we said, this is a huge need. We are, I believe, advocacy requests since last year has grown. Is it by 50 or 100%?
It's ridiculous is what it is. Last year's total for the year was 287. The year before that was like 125-ish. This year we're at 465, and we have another month and a half left. So we're averaging like 2 new women a day. We're gonna definitely hit 500, if not over.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. We are not growing as advocate army fast as the requests are coming in. And can I just point out that Brooke was scared when she got her first one, but now Brooke is on staff, and now Brooke is like, yeah, that case is I'll take the hard one. Like, she gets all the hard ones, and she's not scared.
Well, sometimes, but I have a lot of support behind me. So when I have a question, I go ask, and then sometimes people have to say like, have you asked about that? And I'm like, we're just better together. So that's the idea, is that, we're better together, and let's have a conversation at least if you're wondering.
Yeah.
Yes. And I see somebody in here said they got an email about that and they hadn't felt ready, but now this was very helpful to them. So
Awesome.
I'm not sure what that person's real name is, but we hope to see you in the advocacy world. That would be great. I feel like it's such a wonderful supportive community as well for those healing and also walking as advocates. So we hope and pray that you will consider it. Please join us in being part of this. Echo everything they say. If you feel God calling, please jump on in, and we would love to see you in the advocacy course. Thank you so much both for your time today and for joining us. Thank you for everybody who's watching along with this. We hope you have a wonderful weekend. So thank you guys. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.